Hi, Gehan. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really delighted that you're here. You're in London right now.
I am, yes, stuck down in the lockdown like everybody else. It's not a bad place to be, but I'd rather be out and about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gehan, I am really curious to find out your perspective on what's going on at the moment. We're smack bang in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And the first thing, I guess, for those people who don't actually know you well, what do you do business-wise?
Yeah, so I'm an investor and an entrepreneur. I have been an entrepreneur for the last 25 years or so, and latterly I have leveraged or parlayed my experience to help other companies. And so I now have a portfolio of businesses, all of them in the data and information space. And I am a non-exec chairman of a number of them. I sit on boards. I have some gray hair, so I guess that's what I do now.
Right. And Gehan, I guess one of your businesses, I think, is a startup of your own in the airline industry or focused on the airline industry. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you and gain some insight. Well, first and foremost, what have you seen from the multiple businesses that you're working with right now in terms of the changes that you've had to make, the adjustments that you've had to make, the innovations, if there have been any? What's been going on in the last month or two for you?
Yeah, so speaking generally, as I look at the businesses I'm involved in and as I look at businesses of friends and colleagues, the first few weeks of lockdown have been quite similar in terms of the pathways that a lot of companies had to take. My advice to a lot of people in these kinds of situations is to get ahead of the situation. Don't wait for stuff to happen to you. Make an assessment of where you think things are going to be and go ahead and act on that. Now, unfortunately, what that means when you have difficult times like this is you got to make those tough decisions quickly. And for a lot of companies, large and small, it has been about how do we take our cost base down, because unfortunately revenues are under threat, and how do we conserve cash. So for the first few weeks of the lockdown, I think there was a frenzy of activity as people looked at how to access government support, whether that was through loan monies, whether that was through furlough programs, how to be sensitive, how to be humane, but also how to make sure that the businesses would live to fight another day. So in a lot of these situations, it was about getting people to face up to the reality that things are going to be hard and they're going to probably get harder before they ease up. And that the new normal, whatever that is not going to be the way the world was 3 months ago. And you have to be prepared for it. And you have to be lean, you have to be agile, you have to be ready to pivot. So in the first few weeks of the lockdown, there was a lot of activity around that. There was a lot of activity around, well, how do we do this remote working thing? How do we make sure people are productive? In terms of what I've learned, there have been other crises we've all lived through, whether that was the 9/11 situation, the financial crisis in 2008. As an entrepreneur, I went through the whole dot-com burnout.
Yeah.
And there are certain behaviors that you learn that I think give you a sense of self-belief about the right things to be doing in these situations. And I think one of the critical things is to make sure you stay close to your customer, because you're going through these challenges, so are your customers. This is not the right time to try and sell your customers a new bunch of stuff, because that's not what they're in the market for. Right now, what they need is access to intelligence. They want to be able to share valuable information with others and see what they can learn back from them. Many of their customers are nervous. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about getting deals done. How can you help them? And so it's very critical not to go to ground and say, look, I'm just going to stay quiet until this is over. You have to go out to your customers. Now, going back 10 years, that was very different. Today, what you're seeing is companies just unloading a whole bunch of stuff out to their clients and anybody else who will listen. And that presents is really important, not to just dump stuff on your clients, to be very, very selective about what your clients' needs are. If you've been doing the right things, by the time you come to these kind of crisis stages, you have a decent understanding of your client's workflow. You have a decent understanding of when deals get blocked in that workflow, when challenges happen in that workflow. So target your communication to those types of things and see out. But staying close to your customers, being sympathetic to their needs, giving them access to stuff that perhaps in the past you might have charged for. This is the time to build that customer intimacy that's going to stand you well in the future. In the past, I have been in situations where we've made our products and services and data available to people when they get laid off from their jobs, because frequently, that is the reality of what's going to happen. And having professionals have access to professional information at a time when they have to put their pencils down is hugely valuable. And those kinds of actions build a kind of customer loyalty that will come back to help you as times change.
So essentially you have assets, it's data, let's call it some sort of asset that might actually assist your clients right now in terms of informing their decision-making processes. And Gehan, how have your clients responded to that sort of communication from you, that sort of outreach, that connectedness from you? I would call it empathy, but I guess I lean on a lot of the leadership language around this. But what has the response been?
The response, by and large, has been very good. And as I talk to people across the piece, what I'm hearing is things like webinars and podcasts are getting unprecedented number of views. And I think part of that is just a reaction to the times that we're in. Part of that is a factor of people, looking for data points and trying to understand the situation they're in. So the feedback has been very positive, but that doesn't mean that you can sit on your hands because your competition is doing this as well, right? So you got to find ways to go that extra mile for your client and try and find solutions for them. And information companies in particular are in a great place to do this because you can help your clients by selecting the bits of information that are particularly valuable to them, as opposed to deluging them with everything that's going on in the marketplace.
Absolutely. And Gehan, in terms of the people involved in the businesses that you invest in and that you're involved in, and clients and what have you seen any notable? I'm kind of hesitant to use the word innovations because innovation for me is just finding a better, smarter way of doing stuff. And right now we're all innovating, right? But have you found any? Has there been anything that's emerged from this? And I know it's a short time, it's not a great deal of time to work with, that you think that will stick in terms of going forward, looking at the balance of how we do what we do, our operating systems and our business processes and things like that. Yes, there's been a great shift to virtualization and digitization, for some an exponential shift that was probably planned over a longer period of time, that has been leapfrogged into the here and now. But is there anything that's come out of this that you've actually thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting that, or I hadn't thought of that as a way forward?
Um, I think the one thing, and I'll speak to some of the more specific intellectual challenges, but I think the one thing that has come out of this that I'm not alone in observing is, in fact, how easy it is to work in a virtual environment. Most of us are quite surprised how productive we can be, especially when we're not spending an hour or two commuting to work every day. And I think a lot of companies are going to start rethinking how we can build some of that flexibility into the day-to-day business of operating a company. I'm not convinced that physical office is going to go away, but I think companies will be a lot more open to allowing for a lot more flexibility in terms of virtual, because we have seen how effective it can be of enduring innovation in the workplace. I think what I am seeing is not necessarily anything brand new, but rather the good habits of planning and strategy coming to the fore again. And this is classic, decision making under uncertainty. And a challenge for a lot of businesses is, well, I don't know what tomorrow looks like, so I'm just going to wait and see. That's not good enough. You as a leader have to make some assumptions based on the best available data and go ahead and make some decisions. You hope they're the right decisions, but you're better off going forward with a decision to help your business succeed than waiting to find out together with everybody else that whatever it was going to work is not going to work anymore. So for Ishka, for example, the startup aviation business that I'm involved in, what we do is we provide data, analytics, advice, and events to people who finance aircraft. So the big planes that you and I fly in, all of them are financed in one way, shape, or form. Some of them are leased. About half the world's fleet is leased from specialist companies. The others all have some kind of bank or other financing attached to them. No one pays cash for an aircraft. So what that means is leasing companies, banks, other investment vehicles all have portfolios of these aircraft assets. So at Ishka, what we're currently doing right now is looking at these clients on a case-by-case basis to understand who is going to need what kind of help. Some of these folks will need to work through their assets, shrink their portfolios, modify their portfolios, go through a workout process to make sure that they have assets that can withstand this crisis. For others, they're investors who are looking for opportunities because there are some assets that will be discarded. Others, you can see it happening around you. There are airlines that are shrinking in size. There are airlines that are going bust. Most of the world's airline fleet is now parked, and there is huge uncertainty as to what the new normal will be. When will we start flying? When will confidence return to that marketplace? Is there a greater likelihood that domestic and regional flying will be the way to go in terms of moving people around before more international flights take place? What is the knock-on effect in terms of the kind of aircraft that will be in demand? So, for example, your domestic flights tend to be flown on smaller single-aisle aircraft, whereas your long-distance flights tend to be on the twin-aisle aircraft, the wide-body aircraft. That's obviously going to affect demand. but then you also see oil prices decline to historic levels. What that typically means is that the older aircraft are actually still economically viable, because part of the reason for upgrading to a new aircraft is that they are more fuel efficient, and fuel can account for 40% plus of an airline's operating costs. Suddenly, fuel isn't as big an issue anymore, so you may be able to run those older aircraft longer. What then does that mean for people like Boeing and Airbus and the sales of their new aircraft? So there are lots of variables for us to play with, and trying to understand an individual customer's situation and proactively going to them with solutions and offers of assistance is one of the things that smart companies do.
Right. So that's exactly what you're doing at the moment in terms of the kind of communications you're having with your clients. And I guess that harks back to the data rich, essentially services that you deliver, which enable that. You know, just listening to you, Gehan, and I'm absolutely blown away by the number of variables, as you say, just in the airline industry and certainly with regards to oil, playing out over the next 12, 24 months. And I think it's really tough for anybody right now to have a sense of what that may look like. From a people perspective, you know, how many people will want to get on a metal tube hurtling through the air with a bunch of other people who may be vulnerable. And I think we're going to see a huge clampdown, certainly in terms of senior level people within organizations and their ability to travel unless it's private. So all of these sort of knock-on effects, not only in terms of how industries fare, but human behavior. You know, what is that going to look like? How will we feel about travel and about movement moving forward? So I guess all of this needs to be taken into account. It's, I think if one enjoys playing, certainly, or thinking like a futurist, or, you know, enjoys the realms of strategic play, it's a rich time to be grappling with all of these things. However, you know, we just don't have a playbook. We don't have anything that may indicate which direction that we may be moving towards. So I guess along with that, there must be some, I guess, some in-depth looking at markets and perhaps shoring up various different investments in different ways to try and alleviate some of the risk going forward.
Yes, I mean, what's very clear is that there will be winners and losers coming out of this. So it's very important to try and understand who can withstand this crisis. Airlines and businesses that were suspect going into this in terms of their business models, in terms of their operating structures, in terms of their cost structures, are definitely going to the wall. And there are a lot of airlines out there, especially smaller airlines, many of them in some way state-sponsored, who have been operating in very difficult financial circumstances, South African Airways being one of them. And those airlines are definitely going to the wall in this crisis. So it's important to understand who those folks are going to be and how you can help them through those situations versus airlines that are going to survive this, but potentially with different business models. And I think the challenge here is being able to do this in a virtual environment where, you know, you're no longer able to go have a coffee with somebody and talk through a situation with them, and to have all of your data collection, all of your analysis, all of your business development happen over the phone or over a video call. And I think one of the challenges that we face going through this period of huge uncertainty and change is understanding how you lead a company when the whole structure has gone virtual. And how do you lead a shift in direction when you're not sitting around a table or you're not in the same office? How do you build a culture when the folks are not around you? And I think those are some of the more enduring challenge. If we are going to come out into a world that is more virtual, how do you build those successful companies of the future? And I think leadership is absolutely critical. And having leaders who are visible, having leaders who are trusted, and leaders who are present. I think you almost are forced to over communicate a little bit in this situation in order to be close to your customers, but also critically close to your employees. As you get virtual, and as the way information comes to you shifts, you got to have some processes that are flexible enough to operate in this world, but also are tight enough that you're able to scale a business virtually without having things falling over. And transparency, I think, is critical, especially in difficult times. Good leaders are ones who are honest with their employees, and if there are difficult times ahead, are honest about those difficult messages. I think that kind of honesty money can't buy, and by and large, people appreciate you for that honesty.
Yeah, it's incredibly tough, as you say, when you are working virtually to actually get a sense of where people are at. I mean, we get online in a session like this, and people have prepared their environments. They look like they've got out of bed and had a shower in the morning, perhaps. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know how they're actually doing under extreme stress and pressure. And I agree. We have to come up with some really smart ways of actually building cultures that arguably maybe 50-50. Who knows how virtual we're going to be, but certainly the cost reduction of working partially virtually or wholly virtually for some industries or some functions are right up there. And certainly when it comes into the foreseeable future, which is never too far ahead, cost is going to become a major consideration. So just to leave on that note, and I'm really pleased that you went to leadership. But if you had to, you've given us actually lots of great advice here. But if you had to leave people who are struggling a little bit at the moment with stress, with pressure, with the unknown, with not being sure of what to do and when, what would your last, I guess, salient touch of advice be in order to help others in the same situation?
So I think the important thing to remember, and this is difficult for people like you and me sometimes, is this is only one aspect of our livelihood, right? It is how we make our livelihood, but it is not our lives. And I think one of the downsides of a virtual work environment is this tendency to wake up in the morning, sit down at your desk at 7:30 or 8, and just be there until it's time for dinner, really, taking a break for a sandwich or something. I think now more than ever, people are recognizing the importance of mental health, the importance of balance in your life, and the need to take that time to put some of that balance in your life. I think when you're at your desk, it's very important to be switched on. I think it's very important to make those conversations, to make those phone calls, to have those conversations with people, to move from being a passive recipient of emails that you respond to actually have a plan of, here are the people I am going to have conversations with this week. because they are important to me, they're important to my business, they're important to whatever project I'm working on. And I can actually take in control of that agenda. But also, these are really unusual times we're living in. And I think apart from business, for people who have children, this is an amazing time to actually spend some time with your family, because chances are you're not going to get this opportunity again, except when you're on vacation for, a squeezed week or 10 days somewhere. Use this time to build those bonds and, make those deposits in the emotional bank account. This is not just about your customers. It's also about your family and yourself. So I encourage everybody to take this time to think about the kind of life you want to have and work towards it, not just your professional life, but also your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And to play an active part in building that, rather than hoping that somebody else will come along and deliver it for us.
Absolutely.
Gehan, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute delight talking to you. And it'd be quite fun to do this again in a few months' time and see where we're at and what we've all learned from the situation.
I look forward to doing that, Louise. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.